Welcome to the UPSEA conference session about developing an online undergraduate certificate. We're from the University of Maine. I'm Dagmar Moravec, and I'm the Director of Online Student Services, as well as the Program Developer for UMaine Online.
My name is Tiffany Peterson. I am Retention and Enrollment Specialist and UMaine Online Advisor, and I work primarily with our online undergraduate students by providing them with additional support.
My name is Ashley Crabtree. I am the Coordinator of Digital Marketing and Analytics, and I work with our online programs, both graduate and undergraduate.
And I'm Rich Venozzi. I'm an Assistant Professor in the Survey Engineering Technology program at the university. So the first concept that we want to think about when we're trying to develop a program, is it a good career? And of course, I'm a little partial, but yes, it is. What makes surveying a good career? Well, our students and our graduates and people that are interested in our program, they get to work outdoors in a variety of settings, urban, rural, wilderness. You don't necessarily need a degree. There's an abundant opportunity for career advancement from technician positions all the way up through professional licensure. The workforce is aging, making room for plenty of new folks. And when we look at the workforce statistics, what we see is that the projected numbers over the next decade are stable and certainly a little bit higher, but we're not seeing any decline in the need for educated technicians and professionals. So there's a variety of surveying program models that are used nationally. There's, of course, the existing brick and mortar baccalaureate program. There's articulation agreements for people moving from associate degrees into baccalaureate studies, surveying minors that are often availed by students in, say, forestry or civil engineering. We have an online baccalaureate program, and this is a complement to that, the development of an undergraduate certificate program. Now, the University of Maine has been a leader in surveying education since the mid-1970s. We were early on in putting our bachelor's degree fully online, which opened up access to our program to the world. And we were able to not only put our bachelor's degree program online, but we were able to make sure that that program is accredited. And that allowed us, once that was done, to focus on the additional questions. Specifically, who else might be interested in surveying engineering technology education? And we thought about that, and people that don't necessarily need a bachelor's degree might be surveying technicians, engineers seeking additional knowledge, maybe even licensure as a land surveyor, career changers, and veterans returning to the civilian workforce.
So why develop an online undergraduate surveying certificate? Well, we've definitely seen a growing interest over time with focus on work-ready and licensed programs. So I'm sure many of you watching this who are involved in higher ed, we definitely see this focus on career readiness and career focused programs. So this program definitely addresses some of those growing trends. And many programs located on campus are not set up for working professionals. So what we mean by that is that all of the students that we work with are in the field. They're balancing multiple responsibilities, and coming to campus to pursue an education isn't always a best fit for many of them. So a lot of these students just aren't in close proximity to on-campus programs. So many of our students, they live across the United States. And right now we're actually seeing an increase in student interest from different nations. So on-campus programs, because of that, they're beginning to lose students just because they don't offer that level of flexibility that a lot of students are currently looking for. And when we developed this program, there were no online undergraduate certificates in this field. So retention issues were definitely at play as well. So we saw many of our students leaving our baccalaureate program after completing the minimum credits that they needed to achieve licensure in the states where they practiced. So this program definitely helps address some of those issues.
So one of the other things from our perspective was that the surveying certificate actually was part of a national education strategy, and that undergraduate certificates were identified as a way of addressing the workforce needs of our profession. And here at the university, we were able to leverage our existing resources. We had program support at the institution level. We had faculty expertise, both pedagogically and also in the technical expertise, technical knowledge. We also had the instructional infrastructure through DLL, remote learning technologies, discipline-specific technologies, and we also had the framework for assessment and accreditation. And also, this was a response to a specific industry interest or specific industry need. We talked to our industrial advisory committee, and they enthusiastically supported the development of this certificate. So what are the real program values? Well, it gives us an entry-level credential for technicians and career changers. They can get coursework and have a credential to show for it. It also allows us, for those that aren't in states with a 4-year degree requirement for licensure, to be able to fulfill their education requirements and receive a specific credential. We also are able to provide undergraduate coursework for those with non-surveying baccalaureates and with non-surveying baccalaureate degrees. And this flexibility allows them to go into our master's program, and also it can be a stepping stone for people who earn the certificate and then feel comfortable moving into the baccalaureate program so that they can be a black bear from anywhere.
So how did we get started? It needed a lot of collaboration. When we saw that students were leaving after 4 or 5 classes, when they had completed and were able to sit for licensure in certain states, we started looking at what else could we provide for these students as well as many other students. So we worked with the department and looked at some curriculum that was really necessary, that the industry advisory committee said, these are the 5 or 6 skills that are really, really important. And so put together some curriculum and a proposal that we put through the academic proposal and approval system. At the same time, we started working with undergraduate admissions, academic affairs, student records, financial aid, and with other departments, including Division of Lifelong Learning, to look at how can we develop this certificate that we can make available to the world. And how can we make it an easy, flexible application and system for students to come in? And so we worked together for over a year, putting together a sort of a plan, because there were no other undergraduate certificates, to make this happen. One of the things that we also wanted to make sure was that the students that came into the certificate were eligible for what we have as an E-rate, which is a special accommodation for students that are out of state to have a much lower tuition rate than somebody who would come in at an out-of-state rate. And those things were all pieces that had to come through this variety of different departments and administration to make a decision that this was how they wanted to move forward.
And to piggyback off of Dagmar's point, when we were developing this certificate program, it was really important for us to work very closely with admissions. So because this was an undergraduate certificate program and none of them have existed online at the University of Maine before, we had to really take a close look at some of the requirements and standards that we needed to set moving forward, and how those requirements would be different in some ways from a baccalaureate program. So being able to review those requirements with admissions and going through all of these different steps was essential in making sure that we were able to follow everything by the letter. and also in creating a new application. So that was kind of a challenge moving forward with this program because, like I had said, we didn't have anything in place like this before. So we had gone through a variety of different applications before we settled on what we currently have. So the image that I have for you here on this presentation will lead students directly to our certificate program application. So we've tried making things as simple as possible for students moving forward when they choose to apply. So, certificate development criteria. We really wanted to create an application that was as accessible and easy for students. So, because it's a certificate program, we wanted to make sure that students weren't required to jump over as many hoops as they might need to when applying for a baccalaureate program. So being able to meet students where they are, knowing that they are balancing and juggling a variety of different responsibilities was really important to us. So we also needed to create something that addressed student needs. So when looking at the average of credits that students expressed to us that they needed, we came upon a number of between 15 and 21 credits. So those are the credits that most of our students told us that they needed to sit for licensure in states where a baccalaureate degree was not required. So we settled on that number as a requirement for this program. So it was also essential that we created this certificate that was available completely online because we really do want to be flexible for our students, and they're coming to us from different places all over the country. So we also wanted to make sure that the certificate was definitely a stackable credential. So students are able to use the certificate to move on to either our bachelor's program or our master's degree programs. And many of our students do have those goals in mind as they move forward.
So when it came time to develop the content for the webpage, I worked with our advisors who were fielding questions from potential students and the program coordinators to determine what we should put on the website. We determined that we needed to have what makes this program different than a bachelor's degree, what they can do with it career-wise, what they'll learn, and then everything they need to have to be able to complete and be accepted into the complete an application and be accepted into the program. And then we started working on our marketing. We kind of knew that this would be a program that, you know, once we would build it, they would come. So we really decided to not invest a whole lot up front. Our plan was to kind of get the word out there, create a little bit of awareness about the program, and then let how this industry naturally starts enrolling in programs start to go. So we submitted a press release. Then we also did some social media and some Google ads or Google display ads. And the approach that we took for those was very different than what we've done with other programs in the past. Is we made it very, very broad in terms of targeting. We mainly focused on people who were maybe changing careers, were enthusiastic about the outdoors, and even liked working with their hands. And then we also placed an ad in the Point of Beginning, which is a very, very popular trade magazine for this industry. So our website went live on May 20th. And within the first 30 days of making the page live, we had over 1,000 page views, most of which came from out of state, which was very exciting for a very small and rural state like Maine. And if you look at the bottom, that bottom image is actually a screenshot taken from our Google Analytics for this page. So if you look, that peak that happens in May is when we place that ad in Point of Beginning. But then those ads that you see, or where traffic kind of increases in June, that's when we place those ads on social media and with Google display ads. So it seems like that broad generalized targeting really, really worked for us.
So as you can see here by the images that we have, it definitely shows an increase in both the number of inquiries that we've had for our programs, all of our programs actually, as well as students enrolled. So when we first started our undergraduate certificate program, we were hopeful that maybe we would have a dozen or so students just because it was such a new program and because we weren't doing any real marketing. We were just expecting students to come flooding in some ways through word of mouth. But we were really excited to see 29 students in fall of 20. And we're projecting in spring of 21, right now we're at around 30, but we're expecting an increase in that. And I've also seen actually over time, just very recently, an increase in inquiries in this program due to COVID-19. So a lot of students that I've been speaking with, they're interested in a career change because the pandemic has affected their current career, or they're looking for something completely new. So there is a few silver linings, I guess, in some ways due to the pandemic. So some retention strategies. So when students inquire about our undergraduate programs, I typically advise students to start with a certificate program if they're financially able, because students aren't eligible currently for financial aid. It's an easy transition into our bachelor's program or graduate programs upon completion, because these credits do transfer into our bachelor's program. So students in this program, they are invited to attend our virtual orientation event, which happens every semester. So every semester we offer students the opportunity to join into a virtual orientation event with both the program coordinator and myself, where we talk about any questions they have about the program. And that's an opportunity where we start to build community and network with students from all walks of life. So students are given the opportunity to introduce themselves to their classmates in their cohort to see what drew them to the program and what they're most interested in. So we've also created communication streams to help engage students between the period in which they apply and before classes begin. So we want to make sure that students who apply a year out are definitely communicated with in between that long period. We want to make sure that students don't feel like they've fallen off the radar, because they are important to us. So students are also provided with the same level of advising that all students are provided, whether or not they're non-degree or degree-seeking students. So from the very first point of inquiry, we reach out to students. That's our role as online advisors. So we follow them throughout their entire journey, from the first point they contact us all the way through graduation. And that doesn't change if they're in a certificate program. So they're provided with that same level of support and engagement throughout their entire academic journey. So students have access to the same level of academic support that degree-seeking students have. So they have access to the library, they have access to our main card or their student ID cards. So we want to make sure that students, just because they're a certificate student, doesn't mean that they don't have access to those sorts of resources. So they're a part of the UMaine family, and we want to make sure that they feel that same level of support that all of our students feel. So student challenges. Adult students definitely have a few more things to balance than a traditional student might, especially given COVID-19. I've encountered a lot of students who are juggling of quite a few more things than they typically would when they have small children who are now working remotely as well. That's been adding an additional layer of stress to their lives. So the online environment definitely requires that we check in with them more frequently at different times that aren't a more traditional time frame. So what I mean by that is that we have students who live on the East Coast, or even in different countries, or West Coast, forgive me, or different countries. So we need to be flexible in the time frames that we're able to meet with them. So being able to push back against that traditional 9 to 5 mentality has been really important to the work that we do with UMaine Online. So being able to meet students where they're at is essential to the work that we do. So students enrolled in certificate programs definitely want a rotation of classes that can be completed quickly. And with the certificate program, a lot of students want to be able to realistically complete it within a year's time frame. So being able to offer classes on a year-round schedule has been really important. And it's a conversation that's been ongoing. So currently there's no financial aid available for certificate programs. And this is actually a much more difficult process than I think any of us had thought about going into this. So that's something that anyone who's starting a program, an undergraduate certificate program, is definitely going to have to think about from the get-go, because it is more complicated than I think a lot of people think about initially. So because of the pandemic, we've also seen a decrease in the number of employers willing to reimburse students for their tuition. It's not because employers don't want to reimburse for tuition. It's just because the finances aren't necessarily there right now. But generally speaking, this is a field where employers, at least in my experience, and I'm sure Rich has experienced this as well, employers are really eager to get their employees educated and move up in the ranks within this career field.
So some institutional challenges. So it definitely was challenging that there was no other online certificates before this, and there were no undergraduate certificates like this. So it needed a whole new set of procedures and policy. And there were lots of questions, and it took a lot of different people coming to the table to make sure that it was a good fit, not just for this particular certificate, but for the other ones that are in the process of now being developed and approved. We need to make sure that we add classes that are year-round, because in the past, there were no summer classes available in this particular discipline, and students really want to be able to complete in a year. And many students say, if I get started, I need to keep going, because if I stop, maybe I won't finish. And so it's really important for us to have that as an option. We know that faculty already have much on their loads. So we're really always looking as an institution to make sure that the capacity and the faculty load is being considered, and that we're really looking at course rotations to make sure that this is a supportable and manageable option for faculty, as well as for the institution, as well as the student. The process from initial proposal until approval can take a year or more. Perhaps some institutions have a more concise approval process, but I just know that many times it takes up to 6 months to a year for all these pieces to come together and for approval, and then to get your classes scheduled and to be able to market. It's not always easy to get everybody to be on the same page. And that's a piece that I think institutionally, many of us, their priorities can be different agendas. So having the patience and the determination to really move a process like this forward is going to need a champion, and maybe several champions to move it forward. So our next steps, we're in the process of reviewing and having review and approval by NECHI. That will be our first step to look at trying to apply for financial aid. One of the things that is important to know if you're going to start a certificate is that for financial aid, you must have at least 16 credits. And it is something that we're looking at with this particular program, but with all new certificates, we're saying, if you think you're going to want to have some financial aid, it needs to be at least 16 credits. So we're talking about that, and we're working on that approval, where we have some steps in place to get that started. We also wanted to get it approved by Veterans Affairs. That has already happened, because we understand that it can be a really good stepping stone or option for people coming out of the military, or even who are already reserve and have worked in, as an engineer or worked as a surveyor. These are our quick tips. We've given you lots of information. We understand that there has been a lot of information and talk. We think this page can give you a little bit of information that will help you sort of think about these pieces to move you forward. So it's very important to research the workforce needs. If there's no audience for your certificate, it probably isn't worth setting up the approval process and development and doing all the other pieces that need to have. So knowing that you have that workforce need is paramount to make sure that you can get this done. Understanding what your institutional strengths are, as Rich said. Our surveying program has been around since the 70s and is known for its faculty and for the work that happens. So knowing our strength, we knew that that was a place we could start. Building relationships with all the departments, essential. So you can plan that things are going to take longer. You just never know. Maybe you'll be pleasantly surprised and it'll take a much shorter time, but having a calendar or a schedule, understanding that it could take longer, is also a really good idea. When we talk with Ashley, the most important thing is to think about marketing strategy and analyzing analytics. And it's also really important that people really pay attention in the first 7 seconds. And after that, they often turn off or they're looking at something else. So it's really important to catch people in that very short couple seconds. As Tiffany talked about, putting our student support events or working with students or being available to students at a variety of time zones is essential for our students to feel supported and for us to be able to work together with students, because we have students from all over the world now, and they really need to be able to access us and access our university departments at whatever time works for them. And then communicating with a personal touch. People really want to know that they're not just a number, that they really are part of a community, and being a Black Bear from anywhere is part of our message, and we really try to build that community. We want to thank you for joining us. We'll have this page to let you know that we are happy to have any questions directed to us, whether it's marketing or programmatic or advising. We'd be happy to have a conversation with you. We really appreciate your time and enjoy the rest of the conference.